The Brooklyn Vegan Show is a podcast about music brought to you by the music blog and online record store Brooklyn Vegan. Make sure to subscribe to hear all of our upcoming episodes featuring interviews with musicians and more, and find us 24/7 at brooklynvegan.com, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Hey, welcome to the new episode of the Brooklyn Vegan Show. I'm BV editor Andrew Sacker, and today's episode is an interview with Arben Kalaku of Folly and Jay Salvaggio of The Best of the Worst. Folly and The Best of the Worst recently put out a split on ska punk label Bad Time Records as part of their Wavebreaker series, which pairs one band from ska's new generation with a band from the genre's previous generation. When it came time for The Best of the Worst to pick who they would do a split with, Folly was a no-brainer. If you're unfamiliar with Folly, they formed in New Jersey in the late 90s, and they were really unlike basically any other band. They mixed heavy metallic post-hardcore with ska in a way that I have very rarely heard. And then a few years down the line, The Best of the Worst formed, and they kind of took cues from what Folly were doing. They've never been shy about the band's influence on them, and the mutual admiration between both Folly and The Best of the Worst at this point is undeniable. It's obvious that not only are The Best of the Worst influenced by Folly, but that Folly are blown away by what The Best of the Worst have been doing. And I think really both bands pair together so well, but also really do their own thing. Folly's song on the split is their first new song in 14 years, whereas The Best of the Worst have been very active lately. And it was really a treat to talk to Arben about Folly kind of making this comeback, as well as get Jay's perspective on the band and hear them talk about each other's bands. We also talk about the Folly cover that 2 Minutes to Late Night recently put out, which Jay was part of, alongside Pierce from Soul Glow and Jer, and members of Catbite, Grey Matter, Gouge Away, and Capra. We talked a lot about the ways that the ska scene and the music scene overall has changed over the years, and I think if you like ska or hardcore or both, you'll find that it's a really cool conversation, so here it is. All right, so we've got two guests on this episode. We got Jay from The Best of the Worst and Arben from Folly, celebrating the new split release that you both have out on Bad Time Records. What's up, guys?
Hey, good to be
How
here.
you doing? Yeah, how you doing, Andrew? Jay, nice to see you.
Yeah, pretty good. So I wanted to start by kind of talking to you, Jay. So Folly, I feel like, had this really unique sound, right? I mean, it's like this heavy metallic post-hardcore meets ska. And honestly, I can't think of anybody else I really heard do that until I heard The Best of the Worst. So obviously, Folly is a big influence on The Best of the Worst, especially you're both from New Jersey. I'm sure you must have seen them like at local shows and stuff. Jay, can you tell me from your perspective, like about when you first heard or saw Folly doing this thing that was so unique at the time?
Yeah, so we kind of we didn't really exist at the same time, but um, me, Joe, and Liz, who started The Best of the Worst, kind of were in and around the local metalcore scene in New Jersey, which is devoid of ska pretty much altogether. But at the same time, we were all in marching band, so I was basically in my high school journalism class just searching for bands that had both ska and hardcore in it. And only two bands came up, Folly and A Billion Ernies, which is another band I got really into at the time. So with their overlap, we definitely went to see them a bunch and became kind of our inspiration for kind of why you could just do whatever you want in music and why you can just mash up these kind of things together and make it work.
That's awesome. And Arben, tell me about when you first heard The Best of the Worst, how you reacted to hearing this band that were kind of carrying the torch for what Folly helped start.
I was thinking recently when I was trying to remember when the first time I heard of The Best of the Worst, and I couldn't exactly put my finger on it. But there's a couple of times that I saw the band either just kind of by happenstance or whatever, going back a ways. And we thought it was cool, we also would, kind of chuckled amongst ourselves like, oh, what a poor choice if they want to do something with a band, you know, but yeah, I mean, we we thought it was really great, and we really liked the band going from way back. And a bunch of us have seen them a couple of times, and always thought it was really cool. The band. What's cool is that the band is filled with great players. Everyone in the Best of the Worst is really, really competent at what they do musically. They could sing well, they could scream well. Everyone on their instrument is really, really great, and they, put on a great show, and they have, as far as I can remember. So, if you have those things down, if you go up there and believe in your songs, whatever the songs might sound like, that part translates. And we were really, we thought that part was cool. We thought they were great.
For sure. So how did you all end up connecting and kind of deciding to do a split together?
Well, we connected at one point when three of us decided to do a Folly cover show for Halloween. That was the first time we ever met them in person. So a couple of us and another band and a couple people from another band, we learned a bunch of Folly songs and played them at a small venue, kind of at Folly's, the low point of your activity, I would feel like, right, Arbin?
Yeah, for sure. Do you remember what year that
I think it was
was?
like 2013, maybe.
Right. So, yeah, we were definitely not doing much at all. And we got wind of this show. And Jay, I want to say maybe you and I had met in person
I think your
before
other
then.
band, maybe, and like we played the back of like a liquor store or something.
Right. So I think we must have played before because, because we must have played together, my old band or a different band and Best of the Worst. Because I remember we got the sticker, like
Oh yeah.
the sticker, which Jay can explain. And I remember like maybe hitting you up on Facebook or something like, oh, I'm seeing that the Best of the Worst is doing like a Folly cover set for Halloween. A few of us thought this was like the coolest idea. Like we got to go and check it out. But we also realized like that is so fucking weird, like going to see your own band being covered, right? So I hit Jay up and I was like, "Is it cool if like me and the game like and one of our homeboys like swing down and check this out? Please tell us if it's not cool because I realize how strange it might be for Jay or even for us, But we were like, "Fuck it, let's have a good time," and it was the best. It was the coolest. But so continue, Jay. Sorry,
I forgot where we were even.
totally forgot.
Oh,
Yeah,
so
how
then
did
we
this
so
come
then we
about?
basically met them, and they probably wasn't doing a lot then, so it kind of came and went. And then Mike started doing this wave breaker thing, and you just start dreaming about what would be the best combinations. And I think it's kind of, I mean, the only band that we would pair well with is probably Folly. So uh, we kind of threw that out to Mike. He kind of hit the ground running and drug Folly out of retirement, basically.
Yeah, Arbin, I mean, this is Folly's first song in 14 years. So, like, how did that come to be that, you'd be like, all right, let's finally put out a song?
All it really took was Mike from Bad Time just hitting us up. This was a little over a year ago now. I want to say maybe like August or so, 2021. And we were all, all of us still are, avid fans and consumers of all types of music, right? So we were all very aware of Bad Time Records and very aware of, what the Best of the Worst has been doing, Kill Lincoln, Catbite, and so on. So very aware that the label has been on this really interesting kind of trajectory, if you will, of not just popularity, but just of kind of like critical importance to ska as a genre, right? Like really like picking up this banner that few, if any, were willing to hold and like not just running with it, but cheerleading it to a point that we haven't really seen. So we're all well aware. And, Mike hit us up one day and proposed the idea. And we're like, oh, yeah, Best of the Worst. I haven't seen them around in a while. And this was,
Probably
still
during COVID, right?
yeah, I mean, if it was a little over a year ago, it was he hit us up summer, end of summer 2021. So still kind of in the throes of the pandemic and whatnot. Not really expecting to do much of anything, that's for sure. And just like, the funny little things in life, sometimes all it takes is asking. So he asked, and we're like, fuck yeah, that sounds cool. Let's do it. And we entered this, you know, uh, over like almost a year and a half long process from the first time that he reached out to when the record actually came out, or not a year and a half, but a year and a couple of months. So we were, one, humbled and honored that someone would even ask, let alone, Best of the Worst and Bad Time Records. And you thought like, this is a great use of our time. This is um, it can be a really fun project to unite around and kind of give us something creative and constructive to do, which, we all kind of leapt at the opportunity.
For sure. That's awesome. And the song, you've been playing it live for a few years, right?
Yeah, we've played it out. I mean, we've played a handful of times over the past couple of years, but I know we have played it out live a couple of times. And it was one of those songs. We have a number of songs that we've never recorded, most of which were written, at this rate, 10 plus years ago. Some since, throughout all the periods of inactivity as the band, or with the band, right? We broke up initially in 2011 and then have been kind of getting together every year, every other year, kind of, here and there. We've always remained involved in each other's lives, both personally and musically. We still have the same monthly practice space that we still pay rent on for, I don't know, 12 or 15 years. I don't know. It's been a long time. So we've always had this place to like store our gear and just like randomly like meet up like on a weekend, like, hey, what's everybody up to? Feel like just making some noise, feel like jamming. And through that, occasionally like some riffs or a Folly song would be kind of practiced or created through that. And some were a little more formally kind of written, but we had these songs. We thought that, the song that we chose, Walter White Whale, was the most us, I guess, to some degree, the most closest to what people might expect while still being, still a little left of center or a little out there. So we thought it would pair up really well. And, that's kind of how that came about.
Well, it's a sick song.
Thank you. Thank you, man.
Yeah. So do you have maybe, with this kind of split kicking things off, do you think you might do more new music or maybe even an album?
We've definitely talked about it amongst ourselves. And if you asked everyone individually or in a group, everyone would say, hell yeah, of course, let's do it. There's usually a little bit of a disconnect with all of us between like the idea and the time and work that it takes, not a disconnect, but it's, we've talked about it for a really long time, doing something, even as much as like, just recording something and throwing it up there online, just doing it ourselves. So I think this might be that kind of next step in the motivational process. Like, okay, let's actually do something. We have a couple of songs ready to go. We can write a few more. We can flesh it out, unify it with a theme, and maybe actually put it out on a label. We'll see what happens.
And this song you guys recorded yourself, right, Arvin?
Did we lose Jay?
It says you're offline, but I can actually hear you.
Should I go out and come back?
Or did you just...
Yeah, try that. Try to go out and come back in.
Oh. Excuse me.
All right, I think you're in.
Sorry.
Jay, you need like a little desk light or something. Your face is like so dark right now.
So Arvin, I know you must not have heard him, but Jay had asked. He said you recorded this new song yourselves, right?
Yeah, we recorded it ourselves. This is the first time that we did anything like that, as far as kind of recording a song from start to finish. And how it all started was just before the pandemic kind of kicked in and lockdowns were around and stuff. We had started demoing some songs just to kind of put them onto tape and have a reference point. And then within the first we did these kind of abbreviated sessions. Within a couple of weeks, here's the pandemic. Everything's kind of squashed for the moment. So with that and with the pieces that we had kind of already finished, we thought, well, we can we make something from what we've already started, and we determined that we could retract a few things, reworked a few things. We definitely all kind of individually busted our asses on it, especially Jeff, our guitar, one of our guitar players, who kind of engineered and mixed and commandeered the whole thing. I know we all kind of brought him to the brink of his own sanity and just sort of like in the audio engineering process. And this was all done like kind of like on our own, like at home, basically, like between our practice space, set up as like a makeshift studio, and then in Jeff's backyard in a little shed that he converted into basically like a little mix room. With a few microphones set up. So we sat out there through all last winter, trying not to freeze and trying to make sense out of this demo that we had like parts of, or like the skeleton of, and then we were trying to decorate it with, flesh and blood and skin and bone, all that stuff. So we somehow got it to work, got it up to snuff, and I think everybody's pretty happy with how it all came out.
Awesome. So Jay, what about the Best of the Worst song? Was that recorded around the same time as Better Medicine, or?
Yeah, so like we had essentially put Better Medicine out not too long ago when Mike told us that this was going to be reality. So we were like, oh shit, now we need a song. And we had like a couple ideas floating around, but none that we would want to put on a split with Folly. So we basically had to get a whole new song together, learn it, work it out. We went to Exeter Studios to track drums and bass, and then we tracked the rest up here. Yeah, and it kind of all happened really fast, but it still felt like it was taking a long time. So we were just really trying to push it to get it finished quickly, because the record plants and pressing was taking forever. So we knew we just basically had to get in line at the pressing plant so that we could get these things quickly.
Awesome.
But I think it came together.
Yeah,
that's right, Jay. You better come correct if you're going to step to us. No, yeah, Gatekeeper is so good. When we initially heard the mix that you sent us before it all went out, we're like, oh fuck, it's so good and it sounds so good, and we kind of got a little increasingly self-conscious about our own song. We're like, oh, our shit sucks, and they sound so good. And there's always like the doom and gloom sort of take that you have immediately. So we didn't obviously let that settle in, but we were very, very impressed. The song is so good, and I think you picked a great one. It is awesome.
Thank you, and credit to John Markson, who mixed it from Such Gold. He plays bass in Such Gold. He did the mix on it, and it really came out really good.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I have been seeing John's name more and more on records that I love, so it sounds like the work
he's
doing
did a lot of the
awesome.
Drug Church stuff recently.
Yeah.
And obviously Such Gold and that kind of stuff. So we thought it would be nice to get a little more like of a modern hardcore-y kind of feel.
Yeah, no, I feel like it was like it sounded like a little bit more like a punk type record than maybe Better Medicine.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So Jay, in addition to having played a Folly cover show, you also took part in that Folly cover for 2 Minutes to Late Night.
Oh yeah.
Which was with hold on, I'm gonna get this list correct. Pierce from Soul Glow, Jer, as well as members of Catbite, Grey Matter, Gouge Away, and Capra. So tell us how that all came together.
And actually, I'll give credit to Jake from Grey Matter at Twitter, Scarna on Twitter. They had gotten a message from the account, and I guess the 2 Minutes to Late Night doesn't really know people who play horns or anything. So that was the original question: is do you know anybody that could play on this Folly cover? They ended up looping me in, and then Grey Matter horns played on it, and I knew nothing about pretty much anyone else. I recorded my parts, and then to find out that Ben from Catbite was playing bass too, and actually the video was recorded in my basement. They were staying in my house after a show, and Ben says, "Oh, I did this cover for Folly," and it's like, "You did a cover of Folly?" Because I did a cover of Folly. It's the same thing. So we ended up recording that video in my house. We recorded gang vocals in this room for that track too, and it came out really awesome. I was trying to not tell Arbin. I didn't want him to find out. I wanted to like surprise them, but it somehow got leaked to him that this happened. So when we met up at a Philly show with Best and the Worst and Kill Lincoln, and he was like, oh, I know about this. I'm like, oh, sick. It's gonna be sick. Good timing too.
Yeah, no, it was super rad. It was awesome. And I mean, and it was part of this series that 2 Minutes Late Night was doing that was like covers of like Converge and Dead Guy and Botch and stuff. And like Arbin, like, how'd you kind of feel to have like Folly in there with these like, this series of kind of like, I guess, probably bands that influenced you guys?
Yeah, I mean, bewilderment, shock, honor, almost a little bit of embarrassment to have like our name up there in the queue next to, Botch, Converge, Dead Guy, take your pick. You know what I mean? And they always bring out like serious players. Like no joke, they get like some wild people to be on their stuff, and they did on ours too. Like incredible players and really accomplished bands. So we were, yeah, like I said, a mixture of all those things, and then kind of joking amongst ourselves like, yeah, it must have been quiet idea day at the 2 minutes to late night idea factory, because they must be mining for something, I don't know, at the bottom of the barrel if they're going picking one of our songs. But yeah, humbled, honored, really psyched, incredibly impressed with how it came out. Pierce's take on things, his kind of his own creative spin on the vocals were just really, really fantastic and right on. And can't say enough good things about it. This, excuse me, this process kind of led me to, kind of befriending Jordan a bit and having a few conversations with him, Guarcinio, if you will. So really happy for that. And, Pierce and I have become sort of text pals, talking all kinds of shit about, bands from back in the day and just kind of having a good time. So it, brought us together, brought us closer with people that we didn't know, liked the song, and seeing like Jay and Best of the Worst and Catbite on there was kind of made our hearts melt. It was really, yeah, really exciting, really cool, and just really, really thrilled that something like that even happened at all.
That's awesome. And yeah, I mean, I feel like it couldn't have been like a better group of people. I mean, like, especially like, I don't know, I love to see like just different music worlds coming together. And it's like you got like some of the best people in hardcore, some of the best people in ska. It felt like a really cool moment for just like, everything happening right now around both of those genres.
Especially to throw horns on that bridge. That was one of the sicker parts.
Yet, sort of getting maybe a little bit more of a traditional genre codification onto something that strayed so far from it. We loved it though. It was like um, just a really great take on on the song, and again, just that anyone would think of it in that kind of light just kind of blew our minds. So major thanks to everyone involved, and I hope they keep doing wacky stuff like that, because uh, 2 minutes to late night is the shit. It made me buy one of their t-shirts that I'm anxiously awaiting in the mail.
Awesome. Yeah. 2 Minutes Late Night is awesome.
So good,
That,
right?
that
So good.
was, yeah, such a great like pandemic development too. Like I remember being like so excited for like each new cover when I was just at home doing nothing. And it's awesome that it's still going now that we do have lives again.
Yeah, for sure. I caught on to them like going way back, and remember watching some of the live shows that they did at St. Vitus with Mutoid Man, because I was, I'm generally into most things that Stephen Brodsky does, so following Mutoid Man, hearing that they're, working together on the show, and that seemed perfect. They were like the perfect backing band for that. So seeing kind of how they've morphed into all these other sort of online content areas is just so cool. I wish, Jordan and their team nothing but the best. They're great.
Oh yeah. And just to clarify, yeah, the late night show it actually started as for sure awesome. I when I said it started in the pandemic, I meant the covers.
Oh yeah,
But
for sure.
but yeah.
And
But
like I
yeah,
said, they bring out like really heavy hitters on some
yeah,
of those
yeah,
covers, dude.
always.
Like it's crazy, like who they
No.
get. So it's cool, man. It's cool to see what it's all sort of become.
Yeah, it's super sick. So I want to talk a little bit about like the wave breaker concept, which I've have previously done interviews with Kill Lincoln and Less Than Jake and Cat and Mike Park. So this is the third time I'm asking this exact question. But from your perspectives, Jay and Arbin, tell me like how you view like the sort of this wave breaker concept of like, taking a band from, I guess, a past wave of ska and a band for the new generation, putting them together, like what it means to you to be doing something like this, what kind of impact you hope it has, what kind of message you hope it gives listeners, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, I guess I'll go first.
Go for it, Jay.
Go for it, Jay.
I mean, it was pretty evident even in the first show that we had last weekend that a bunch of people have come up to me and were like, "Oh, I was big fans of Folly. I never heard of you guys before, but all I've been doing is listening to you guys this week up to the show." So that's the kind of stuff that we're just trying to do on a bigger scale. I mean, a lot of people listen to Folly, but maybe they don't realize what we're doing over here with horns on the side. So by bringing us together, I mean, we could only just expand the reach of both bands, because there's a lot of new people to ska too, and they probably don't know of what happened 20 years ago, and now they have a whole discography of Folly to go check out and get into also. So
yeah, I mean, the name Wavebreaker is so interesting, right? Because there's a few different takes that you could have from that. The way that Mike from Bad Time kind of laid it out at first, his concept was to unite sort of multi-generational ska or ska influenced bands, and we thought like right off the top of our heads, like, oh, that's great, very, very cool. So maybe it's wave to wave, I guess, breaking amongst the existing waves, but also maybe it's about breaking all the waves, maybe it's fuck all the waves of ska, you know what I mean? It's fuck that shit. And if you adhere to something so rigid, then you're kind of missing out on a lot of other things that happen because, bands like ours, Jay and yourself too, like we exist outside of what would be considered a wave. Is there a fourth wave happening now? Maybe someone would say so, but I don't know, right? So maybe it's about saying fuck you to all the waves, you know what I mean? And taking what you like and moving on, like anyone should do with anything that they like.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's a really weird thing. Like it's weird. Like take like emo, for example. People talk about emo and waves too, but I feel like with emo, it's like everyone is just like so excited to like finally declare one wave over and the next one started. Like emo's like, we're on the fifth wave now, and like someone else would be like, no, actually, if you look at it, we're definitely on the seventh wave. But with ska, I feel like it's so just like first wave is Jamaica, second wave is two tone, third wave is the popular stuff in America in the 90s, and that died and it's been over. And it's like it really is like I feel like this harmful thing to the genre because like I mean Folly really broke after that, and the best of the worst has been around for like 15 years. Yeah. So it's like you're like it's not. I feel like both Folly and the best of the worst have kind of been in this middle ground between what people think the third wave is and what maybe people think new tone or for whatever's happening now is. Like you've both kind of like we're doing what you were doing and just killing it when people weren't talking about a current ska wave even existing.
Yeah, for sure. It's I get it, right? People like to have things kind of neatly organized when it comes to um, pop culture type things or really anything, so I get it, right? Like I like hardcore from New York between 1983 and 1987, or I like punk from this place during this time or whatever, and I get it. And that's also one of the fun things because as you come up in underground music, especially in especially like in the pre-internet era, right? So much of that was based on regionality, right? Like who's doing what in different parts of the world or different parts of the country, and what were they doing during certain periods of time, right? So I get it, right? And maybe certain things break and have a larger sort of subcultural impact, but to limit it as this existed between here and then officially died at this point, it's like, well, maybe if you're basing it on bands that had videos on MTV, but who used like social or cultural things like that as any kind of marker of anything important aside from some asshole writing an article in some like mainstream publication. Like who cares? That's what we're going to base things on. So to me, it's similar to the band, right? And similar to the music. The lines are always blurred. It's all gray area, and you make what you want of it.
what was interesting to me, Arbin, is that
Mhm.
when I first heard Folly, it had really nothing to do with. I mean, I knew there was ska in your music, but it didn't really have to do with like a ska scene. I mean, you guys were kind of in Jersey when sort of that whole like Jersey Long Island emo thing was happening. You were on Triple Crown, which is like a big label for that stuff. I mean, tell me a little bit about like just like the Jersey or tri-state area Northeast scene at that point, and you know how you kind of got started and kind of got lumped in with some of those bands.
Yeah, when we were first coming up, I guess really in the mid 90s, as far as like going to shows and really being exposed to, these underground scenes, whether it be punk, hardcore, ska, whatever. There was, we come from a very rural area of New Jersey, Sussex County, New Jersey, which is like basically the top of New Jersey comes to a point, and basically that triangle right there is Sussex County. So it's kind of far from like everything, right? So we really had to like make these grand sort of plans to escape, to like see bands, to go to shows, because everything was like an hour plus away. And anyone who's grown up in like a rural area, it's like when you're 15, trying to get 50 miles from your home seems like impossible. It's like might as well be in Africa, you might as well need a plane and cross the ocean. So 15 years old, trying to get to New Brunswick was like really tough. But we really came up in kind of like this sort of like a micro scene, this little era in North Jersey where there were a lot of mixed bill shows, with a lot of different types of bands all kind of playing, and especially at that time, there'd be ska bands and pop punk bands and hardcore bands and street punk bands and, different like, oi bands. And at the time, certainly mid and late 90s, a lot of people really dressed the part. So you'd go to these shows and there'd be the Liberty spiked mohawks and rude boys and skinheads and skaters and all different kind of parts of kind of all the different parts related to punk rock kind of sort of represented. Dudes with Krishna locks on the back of their head and all different types of hardcore stuff. So to us, that made a huge impact, sort of coming up. We went to tons of shows kind of as we were teenagers and coming up that were multi-genre, right? And there were a few reasons for that. One of the reasons would be, you do these local shows, and this is kind of before before you started working with, say, like a show promoter or a rock club or whatever. Like you'd book a local show in the church basement or in the Legion Hall or in your backyard, and you ask your friends to play. And your friends are generally in whatever bands that they're in, and you ask the bands that you went to high school with, and that might be an emo band and a street punk band and a hardcore band and a straight edge band. So that was a lot of our development, right? Kind of seeing a lot of these things come together, but managing to kind of unite around something, the music being so important, us really kind of taking that sort of ethos and running with it. So morphing into this sort of multi-genre type band seemed like just kind of an extension of what, where our minds were at for, since we were teenagers, since we were in 7th grade or 8th grade, seeing 6 different bands, most of which didn't sound the same, at local shows. So that's kind of a huge part of the origin story, right? This sort of mixed bill, multi-genre thing. And if not for that, I don't think we would have survived doing tours or playing the shows we did, because we really had to rely on that sort of open-mindedness, right? Because nothing we did was ever standard or would conform into any kind of one area. So, having that kind of free-spirited and open-minded development as kids, I think helped us, because we would tour with all types of bands. We would play, we'd be the odd band on a metal show, or we'd be the heavy band on, a indie rock or emo show or something, or we'd play with ska bands who, again, we sounded nothing like, so there was always this kind of, sticking out like a sore thumb kind of vibe. But I think we kind of embraced that, because we embraced this sort of, I guess the originality of it, and being able to see music through a few different prisms, as opposed to being so locked into one style or ethic or belief system or what have you, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny how Folly was like, we shared a little bit of DNA with everybody, and then as a result, sounded like nobody. You know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. And it's there's incredible advantages that come with that, and there's incredible freedom that comes with that, and there's sometimes incredible loneliness that comes with that too. You know, it's like we would be pretty well accepted by certain scenes or in certain areas geographically because we sounded a certain way, but maybe never fully accepted, or maybe dissed or disrespected, or people yelling bullshit at shows, which like happens all the time to all kinds of bands. We were never too sensitive about that kind of shit, but it's like we'd get right up to the finish line. We'd get 99% of the way there, but that 1% is like, well, you're still a ska band, so you can't be a hardcore band. Or, well, you're kind of a hardcore band, but you're still this, or you're still that. Or, well, you're kind of a ska band, but you're not a real ska band. You know what I mean? Because we don't, play in certain styles for long enough periods of time for whatever kind of purists are out there.
Yeah, well, purists are boring, so.
Yeah, I agreed.
Yeah, I mean, everything you're saying is so sort of relatable to, like, from my personal experience too. Because, like, I mean, I feel like back, like, I'm a little bit younger, but like, I probably started going to shows in like the early 2000s, and like, I don't even think we called them mixed bills. I think we just called them bills, and it was just like anybody of any type of punk rock was, or even just like even if you weren't, but you just lived near there, and it was like somehow like local or underground, like it was just involved in like um, I just feel like that was like a huge part of my upbringing, and it has been weird to see. It almost feels like things are more like niches are separate now. Like I'll go to a show and it's 5 screamo bands in a row sound exactly the same, and I'm like, they're all sick. But like when I went to shows 20 years ago, it'd be like one band like this, and then like a pop punk band, and then like a hardcore band. And
Yeah, totally.
yeah, Jay, what was that? Sorry, go ahead, Arvin.
No, I was gonna say, like, we absolutely love that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what we've brought part of that thinking to, most of the things that we have some control over, whether it be bands that we play with or venues that we play at, or, just kind of what we do. We love the idea of just kind of mixing it up. And I guess kind of counter to that, we're actually doing the first, let's call it, ska punk show we've done. And I can't even tell you how long. We're actually playing with all, a bunch of Bad Time Records bands in Connecticut in a couple of weeks, and ends up being kind of like the most, I don't want to say pure ska show, but for the sake of argument, right? Like it's like all the bands play ska, and I don't know if we've ever done that
Right, because by the
in our
time I got
lives,
into
right?
Folly, you were really strictly playing like metalcore shows mostly, especially at least in New Jersey. I don't know when you guys branched out, but in Jersey, it was pretty much like hardcore shows.
Yeah, I think we were most closely associated, with that side of things, and that was also what was, I guess, just what was
It
happening
was more
more and
happening, yeah,
more,
for sure, yeah.
in the sense of like, who would we play with? What other bands are happening? Who would we get lumped together with? And at the time, um, as far as ska bands went, I mean, we always kind of dreamed that like either Catch 22 or Big D and the Kids Table would take us on tour, because they were the two main sort of ska-ish bands that were kind of still hitting the road pretty hard at the time. Like between say 2003 and 2006. Catch 22 maybe a little bit less towards that time period, but there wasn't a lot of options to get paired up with ska bands or ska influenced bands, really. So um,
Yeah, that was a
you
real
know,
dead time for the scene.
yeah, and I think because the band, like, some of our songs are so heavy, it just always kind of seemed to make sense. It's like, okay, they got these ska parts, but they got these mosh parts that'll really, really knock you over. So that we'd play with anybody, whether it was a death metal band or whether it was a beatdown hardcore band, and we could hold our own because some of our songs got down like that. But yeah, I forgot where we're going with this, so we can just somebody help me now.
No, yeah, Jay, I mean, you must experience that too, right? With the best of the worst. Like, there's got to be times where you're on a bill where people are like, if you're hanging out like with hardcore metal kids, they might be like, there is ska, these are horns, this is bad. But I would imagine like there's got to be ska shows you've been on where ska kids are kind of like, whoa, they're like breakdowns, like that's not what we're used to.
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, it's a little different because we're setting up before we play, and there's people with horns on stage, so
Mm-hmm.
we like immediately get judged from that standpoint. Uh, what always happens to us is you come up to us after and you say, "Oh, well, I don't like ska, but I like you guys." But that
Mm-hmm.
just means you like ska. I'm sorry. Um,
For sure.
so because of that, we more got lumped into ska shows. But in New Brunswick, we would play basement shows, and those kind of shows become very mixed bill. It's people that are going to Rutgers, so there's some noise bands, there's all different kinds of stuff, and those are always the most fun for us. Surprising people don't know what to expect, and everyone just gets confused, but ends up having a good time, which is really what it's about.
Yeah, for sure. Jay, what was it like for you, sort of like when you first started going to shows? Like, what were your experiences like? What kind of like scene were you maybe drifting towards?
Yeah, when we first started going to shows, it was mostly like a melodic hardcore type VFW hall scene in New Jersey in high school. Uh, and then we started a ska band, so then we started going to ska shows. So we would just go to both basically. Uh, there's some crossover, but Hamilton Street Cafe was huge in New Jersey. I don't know if that was your time, Marvin, or maybe that was a little
Oh,
bit.
it sure was. Yeah, man. We played there a bunch back in the day. That and their sister club, Bloomfield Ave. Bloomfield Ave was like our kind of like our home base for a period of years. But Jay, you said something. I want to see if I heard you right. So, did you say you started a ska band and then started going to ska shows?
Yeah, probably. I mean, we were all in marching band first, so we knew people that play horns. So we figured out that
Okay.
this kind of music existed. And then there was one high school ska band of people that was in our marching band. So we would go and see them. And then we were kind of like, oh, well, it'd be funny if we were in a ska band, right? So then we just started doing it. And then we just also wanted to play breakdowns. So it kind of moved in that direction relatively quickly.
Did you? And I'm sorry, Andrew. Another question, but
Go ahead.
Jay, did you develop like a love for ska because you were in the best of the worst, or did you have this sort of love of ska and then it kind of just filtered out into what you ended up playing?
Yeah, I think it
Like
kind of.
when did you take the deep dive into ska? Did it take kind of being in a ska band and playing it to really sort of dive in?
Yeah, well, it's a little bit of an interesting pathway because our high school band director was Jamie Egan, who was in Catch 22. So going into high school,
No
I was like,
shit.
okay, this is something that's I don't really know about. I started like listening to these kind of bands, and it kind of snowballed as I'm like playing viola with this guy in the room too, and then seeing him play on the weekend with Streetlight. So that was kind of our gateway into seeing how it could all work and seeing how it's possible, and then we just kind of took our own spin on it and started doing what we wanted to do.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I ask this question in a lot of interviews, but I always like to hear the answer. Why do you both think that ska's gotten such a bad reputation?
Hmm. I don't know, right? There can be so many ways that you answer this. Jay, you want to try
I
first?
think it's just mostly the the '90s goofiness that penetrated the mainstream. People just assume that everything is that, and it wasn't. It wasn't before then, and it hasn't been since. But there's just that one snippet of time that if you go on YouTube now, that's what's going to come up first, and that's what people associate with it. Uh, and that was a goofy time, but I think it's a lot different now.
Yeah, even with the goofiness, I still struggle to understand y- why people hit it so hard or why it's like this unending butt of a joke that just doesn't seem to like let up, and it's just so unfunny. It's like we get it. It's a wave. We get it. It was a trendy thing for a period of time, like most things. Like lots of things that we're all involved in right now. We probably all didn't look the same and act the same and speak the same 20 years ago. So it's like, yeah, I get it. There's periods of time where social and cultural things shift. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, is the goofiness that offensive? Like, come on, give me a break,
And
you
it's
know?
still happening. Like, I don't need to see the mozzarella stick meme anymore.
Dude.
I'm actually okay with that.
Well,
I
maybe
don't
once you
mind.
get sent it 10 more times, then you can, like, everyone who sends it feels like they discovered it for the first time.
Yep.
You know, I actually think that's funny, so I'm fine with it. Luckily, it's not sent to me often. If I had to deal with that, I guess you know, as much as some other figureheads in the ska world might, then I might think differently. But yeah, I mean, I get it. You know, if every ska band looked and sounded like Real Big Fish, like a bunch of you know, dudes up there clowning and wearing Hawaiian shirts and stuff, yeah, okay. But like, it is so much more than that one thing, and to paint it
And
uh
even if you want to do that, that's also cool. Like, I'll
yeah,
still enjoy your set.
oh
You
yeah,
could,
I'm saying do your thing, you
yeah.
know, but you know, it's so much more than that. And to kind of you know, yeah, I guess just to like wholesale discount a genre because a bunch of white kids in the 90s sort of co-opted it, and MTV co-opted it, and all those things. Like, yeah, I get it. You know, corporations take advantage of youth culture. That's what they're supposed to do, right? But as like participants in an underground music scene, we generally should be able to read through those lines or see beyond that to some extent, you know? So whatever. I guess it's just something that's always kind of stuck at me. It's like, I don't understand why it's so funny. Maybe I'm oblivious to it because I'm a participant, but um, yeah, if you don't like it, don't like it. Fine. You know, but yeah, if everything in ska was, you know, shirts with flames coming off them, and you know, that's the ska haircut, the, you know, the Blink 182 Real Big Fish haircut with the spiky bangs in the late 90s. You know what I mean? If it was all that, then yeah. But to say it's all one thing, like, you're really discounting um, a ton of things, you know?
Also, like, what genre of music never had goofy bands and was never co-opted by the mainstream?
Yeah, like
Right.
none, I guess. Zero examples probably exist. So
Maybe power
yeah.
violence.
What'd you say?
Maybe power violence. I don't think has been
Okay,
co-opted by
yeah,
the
right.
mainstream
But
yet.
maybe
But
that was a bad way to word it. Maybe there are a lot of niche subgenres that have never been but like, but those are still goofy. There's real lot of goofiness going on in those like extreme underground subgenres, you
Oh,
know.
yeah, for sure,
total
for sure.
goofiness. Absolutely, without a doubt, you know. Yeah, but that's the thing, right? Power violence is interesting because that's basically become one of the most I guess gatekeepery sort of like what we do is secret kind of vibes, or as far as scenes go, you know. So, you know, they have their own stuff to deal with about, you know, who has an original fucking Siege shirt or some bullshit, you know, whatever. Drop Dead is cool, okay, fine. But like, whatever, you know, shit is corny when it's taken that when it's taken that seriously. Like, come on, get off you know, the, you know, crust punk horse that you rode in on, you know.
Totally. I mean, I think that's the thing. Like, and you know, it really, I really laugh a lot too when I see gatekeepers in ska because I'm like, you're really gonna like gatekeep ska, you know, like.
Well, right, but also, but you know, when you said that, it made me wonder. Like, well, maybe people of that mindset are like, we're never going to let what happened in the '90s happen again. We got to check IDs at the door this time. You know, no way is there going to be, you know, the cast of Friends skanking on, you know, primetime TV or whatever. You know, so who knows? You know, some people have a real sore spot for that shit.
For sure. I personally kind of hope, like, I mean, I don't think anyone needs a repeat of like the peak oversaturation '90s mainstream ska, but I kind of hope, like, you know, maybe one or two of the bad time bands get like a breakthrough or something. Like, um, it's just it's too good to be just niche, you know?
yeah, I don't think we're at a point
For
where
sure.
anything can get that big anymore.
Right, that
But
too. Like,
I certainly hope that uh, our friends that are working really hard can be successful at it. I mean, we were just out with Jer for a minute, and those shows were insane. I filled in with Catbite some, and those shows have been insane. So there's really is some momentum, which is great. And that's why we should all support each other and not gatekeep shit with each other.
Yeah, I mean, I caught you guys with Jer and Killinkin at Vitus. That was like packed. It was awesome.
Yeah, all
Like,
those shows were sick.
yeah, it definitely felt like it kind like not to like over, I don't know, hyperbolic, but like it felt,
Ska is
yeah,
back.
right, yeah, exactly. No, it kind of felt like, witnessing like a really important moment that people are going to look back on and call it important, like it
Well, and
just,
it's weird because like the whole pandemic happened and this kind of all gained momentum during that. So it was probably only the second time. We did a couple shows with Killinkin in March. It was the first time like we got to see what is actually out there, because we honestly we haven't known. We've put out albums, we've done stuff with friends, but we don't. Are people listening? I don't know what Spotify says. Some people are. What does that even mean? I don't know. Who's going to come out to a show? And then some of these shows sold out. A lot of people were at all of them. It was really fun, and it felt like there was some actual momentum, which is cool to see.
for sure. And yeah, I mean, even like, like before the pandemic, I feel like I didn't hear very much about ska shows except for like legacy bands. I did, if there was like a packed ska show at St. Vitus for the pandemic, I didn't know about it. So it feels like things are, different now. Like the excitement is there. There's like a lot of people who are ready for it. It feels good.
Yeah, the shows were happening. There was just no one there. So it's cool that people know it exists now.
Right.
I think more than anything, what a lot of bands are proving, and especially what Mike and a lot of the Bad Time bands are proving, is that there's a viable scene. There's a pathway to play shows with ska bands, or have a ska centric show, or even an all ska band show, right? Those kinds of things can exist, do exist, and they're fucking cool, and it's fun. And throughout ska's history, it's one of the more sort of inclusive scenes, historically. I mean, looking at Two Tone and their the political mindedness and the anti-racist message, looking at the third wave, sure, it was, there was mass market appeal, but it brought in a little bit of everybody, right? Like it brought in people because it was fun and it was cool and the music was great. And there's parts of that happening now. It's fun, it's cool, and the music's great.
And it's still diverse. Like you see a show with us and Catbite, you're not getting the same thing. So there's a lot of variety within it, which is really cool.
Yeah. I mean, I always say if I ever talk about this stuff to anybody, I'm like, no two bands on Bad Time Records sound alike. And also it's like, I mean, there's like the diversity, just not just musical diversity, but like the types of people, like, from all different backgrounds, different genders. And it feels like ska is like really accepting. I mean, just sort of the other question I asked, why does ska get a bad reputation? The other question I like to ask is, why do you think it's happening now? Why is this comeback happening? And I mean, a lot like, Reed from We Are the Union, her answer was, I think it's a really great soundtrack for like queer music. And when I talked to Bad Operation, they were like, the Trump administration is why Scott's happening. Scott's political music, Scott's fun music, and that's the backlash that like the reaction we need to the Trump administration is a ska resurgence. And it does feel like a lot of this is related to what we're seeing with like the political unrest, and also just what we're seeing with like, more and more people being like proud of who they are and like self-love and just like let being yourself, and ska is a great place for that to happen. I know
Yeah,
that was kind of me talking at you
that's
guys,
kind of
but
it's kind of hard. I mean, even if you look at all the Bad Time bands, we've all been doing it, whether it's in the bands that are currently out now or previous bands. We've all been playing this music for so long. Uh, to me, it's strange that people care now when they didn't before, because I think everybody should have been listening back then too to Fatter Than Albert and the Snails and old We Are the Union records, because that's what I was doing. So it's weird to me. I don't know. It's different, but I'm just going to keep doing it, even if people stop listening.
Yeah, Andrew, I think you're right, and everyone that you mentioned kind of nailed a few, I think, key points that I was kind of alluding to before. Um, Ska has always been uh, about inclusivity, right? Because in the 90s, it was the one place where, let's say like kids from the high school band could start a band. That was kind of rock and roll based. It was a place where, women and people of color could feel safe and included. If you look at, you don't have to look too far to see ska bands with women and people of color, right? You might have to look a little farther in some other genres or some other scenes, or look out in the crowd and see who the participants of a show is to find, people with not just diverse backgrounds, but diverse identities. So ska is always, in my experience, and from what I know, and I only know firsthand up to a point, but it was always a place where, like I said, anyone could be there, and there was less of a code that you needed to follow. And
Yeah,
I
there's
think,
no more welcoming show environment than a ska show, 100%.
yeah, and it can be, it can have that welcoming vibe, but it could also have a hard-edged, sinister vibe. It can have all kinds of things too. It can be rough around the edges. You might get a different vibe watching Mephistopheles than you do watching Hepcat. You know what I mean? But still, um, parts are interchangeable, or parts of the vibes of their shows are, kind of universal, where you could still, um, anybody could still take part and not just be accepted, but be like welcomed and encouraged to continue to take part.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that feels like a really good place to call it. Is there anything else that either of you feel like you want to add before we say goodbye?
Jay, go
Uh,
for it.
I know. I think just make sure that you check out all the bands that are doing stuff right now, because and support them, because that's really what we need to keep doing it. That's really all I got.
Yeah, for sure. I think ska is, people say ska is having a moment, but that moment would be meaningless if it weren't for bands actually being out there and doing the hard work and getting in the van and playing every night, and doing the hard shit that nine out of 10 people would never do. And that last 10th person that does it fails. So it takes a lot to get out there and do your thing, and it takes a lot to be good. And there's a lot of really fucking good bands out there that are worthy of attention and support and fans and adulation and all that stuff. So I hope people you know look at Bad Time Records, for example, and find a number of great bands, and just, keep your eyes open, look outward, find cool shit, because it's fucking hard to do. And there's a lot of bands that make it look easy. And I give them a lot of credit. But yeah, check out our collective record on Bad Time Records, Wave Breaker 3. Fuck the waves, right?
All right. Well, thanks so much, Arvin. Thank you, Jay. It's been a blast chatting. Thanks for coming on the show.
For sure. Thank you.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Thanks again to Arvin and Jay. Thanks for listening. Go stream Folly and the Best of the Worst new split, Wavebreaker 3, out now on Bad Time Records. It's super awesome. If you like ska or hardcore or both, you should definitely give it a listen. It's very rad, very unique. Also, before we go, I just want to give a quick shout out to another podcast that I've been a fan of. It's called The Record Process. It's co-hosted by Casey Cavalier of The Wonder Years and producer, mixer, engineer Tom Conran. They've got great episodes up with Algernon Cadwalder, Anti-Flag, lots of other bands. And basically what they do is they talk to a musician about a specific album they've made. They get really into the making behind the record, and they got, all these great stories. And I think it's a very, very cool podcast, and I cannot recommend it enough. It's called The Record Process. Go check it out wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks again, and stay tuned for our next episode.